Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby, and here with me is Kelvin Leon Smith from Fat Ham. Your character is very reserved, very buttoned up when we first meet him, but it is a very boisterous play. So, what is it like trying to emote through all of that while your co-stars are really much more animated at first?
It's a bit of a challenge. I don't get the immediate gratification of laughter from my part, at least not intentionally. And I think that, even when the laughter does come, it can be in really uncomfortable very vulnerable moments for me sometimes. But it's the audience's reaction, or, very specific people. It's only like a few people per audience in which this happens, but they're having their own unique experience. And but I do have to say that it can be difficult. It can be difficult to kind of try to maintain this deep secret that this character has from the moment that he's on stage, and kind of maintaining that through line to the end. It can be, it's pretty hard. Pretty
Yeah.
hard. Yeah.
Well, you've been with this character for a while. You performed this off Broadway as well in that iteration. I'm curious, what would you say is kind of like the biggest shift in the character? Have you learned more things over time, comparing this version to the off Broadway one?
What I kind of focused on this time around was getting deeper in my relationships with individuals. I don't have a lot of text. I don't have as much text as a lot of my other castmates. And so a lot of my communication has to be nonverbal, or it has to be kind of like whispered on the side, and maybe something else is going, like a main scene is going on, but life is still happening. So just deepening those relationships through a lot of the more nonverbal communication, and just even my thoughts about who people are to Larry, to the character. Just like continuing to detail and refine those for myself.
Yeah. What would be kind of your own relationship to the character? Do you put some of yourself in there? Are there traits you recognize within him?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to be honest, I don't think there's any real difference except specific circumstance. I'm gay, I'm Black, I'm from the South. There's been so much repression, I guess, in my own life. We see this in Larry, and especially around the same age. I came out around the same age that we say that Larry is, which is 21. And the parallels are right there. I mean, I didn't go to the military, but having to suppress that part of yourself, your sexual orientation, to keep yourself safe is something, whether it's for family reasons, society, all of it, just to maintain a sense of safety, and to not, have to live in such a vulnerable place all the time. I know what that is, and I lived it for a big chunk of my life. So yeah, I would say
There's
it's very close to my own lived experience.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's been sort of a series of now Black queer storytelling that has been
Mhm.
able to live on Broadway, which we haven't really been able to see before this moment. We've had Strange Loop, Ain't No Mo, we have Fat Ham now. What does it feel like, because you relate to this character, seeing that type of storytelling broaden for the Broadway landscape?
I think it's important. I mean, this buzzword representation, I mean, we're hearing it everywhere in regards to every type of marginalized group of people, but it's crucial, because what that ultimately means, I think on one hand, yes, I'm interested in seeing people who look like me and who have had the same life experience as me, but it is the best vehicle for people to expand their capacity to empathize with groups of people that they otherwise wouldn't have contact with. I think it's of the utmost importance, and I hope that we continue to see more plays from marginalized groups. And I'm so happy. I mean, especially last year, we saw there were so many off Broadway, and then, like you mentioned, with Strange Loop on Broadway, and then Ain't No Mo. But I think hopefully we continue to see this trending in theater, because uh, we are all human and our stories are worthy. And I think it's the best way. I mean, storytelling changes minds, you know, and I think it's high time.
Yeah. And this one has a great storyteller. James, what is it
Mm.
like working with the playwright there on a new piece? You don't always get that opportunity if you're working on a revival, for instance. What is it like working with him and being able to, be in the room for his process?
You know, he is probably one of the most egoless people I've ever met. And I say that honestly. The way that he works in a room, in our room specifically, I can only speak to that. But if there was a line that you felt didn't sit great in your mouth, or a situation in which you felt like maybe a line or two could be omitted or rephrased, he was completely open to like hearing that, uh, what might suit it better for you as the actor.
Hmm.
And 9 times out of 10, it was a green light. You know, he was amazing with that. Um, I I would hope that there were a lot of playwrights like that out in the world, that there are a lot of writers like that in the world, but you know, everyone's different. But it's a true gift to work with a writer like that.
Yeah. I think, thinking of his lines, one of the most impactful pieces of the show to me, especially from your character, was when he finally confesses, his love for Juicy and says, like something to the effect of I want to be soft, and that whole monologue you have, because it's so far away from the image he's been trying to portray.
Mm.
What, just can you talk about that scene and what is it like for him to finally drop his guard?
I think the element that has kept him from being that soft person, which I think is his true self, is removed. It's his mother, and she goes inside. It's Rev, he goes inside. It's all the people who have these expectations of a type of masculinity, a type of straightness, an anti-queerness. They all go into the house, and he's left there with someone who he I think he has this deep desire to be how Juicy is and how Juicy kind of moves through the world. And that's, I mean, ultimately that's pretty much the secret that he comes in with, is that he wants to be like Juicy in this way of living his true authentic self. But what we see with Juicy is that he's still not accepted fully as
Mm.
he is, except by his mother. But I think in that moment, it's like the ultimate release. It's like a weight is lifted off because he's finally able to express the thing he's been holding on so tightly with.
Mm. And you go kind of from a super extreme high to a super extreme low in a very short period of time. That scene where he's outed is just really hard to watch, for a bit, and it's really brutal. I kept thinking like, oh no, he's going to end up like Ophelia. That's
Oh
where
God.
that's where we're headed.
Yeah.
What is that moment like? How does he work through?
You know, it's a progression. I mean, just as like the actor, when I was at the public, there would be nights where I'd be almost inconsolable, because I was outed
Mm.
by my mother to my family. I think she did it in a meaningful, loving way so that people could. I mean, I come from a very religious family. I'm not religious at all, but she did it in hopes that people could like pray for me and like do all these things. Um, but having to replay that night after night really played a toll when I was at the public. But the time between that and that ham, I was able to do a lot of inner work and working with a therapist, and then coming back, it's been more of a cathartic thing to kind of repeat that process over and over again. Um, it's kind of like the joy. It's there's I think there's like a fine line between like when the acting is therapeutic versus when it's cathartic. And I know it doesn't sound really it doesn't sound like it makes much sense to have to relive such a terrifying thing over and over again. But you get more of a bird's eye view. I get more of a bird's eye view every time that I do it. And I know that I'm safe and that I'm taken care of by such tremendous castmates. But yeah, I mean, I think for Larry, ultimately, it's hard to speak on because I don't want to give away the end. But that's also a part of the secret that I've developed for him coming into the play. It's about timing too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think ultimately I will say, like, he had intention of doing it on his own, but that wasn't the gift that he was given. He was given this horrible gift from his friend, or someone who thought he was his friend. And that's being outed before he was ready to actually do it. But I do think he already had intended on doing it himself.
Sure. Well, I think it's an important, story to have up there. I know, like, when I saw it, there was lots of, even just as the play was exiting, there's a lot of conversation from audience members immediately about what they saw from their own lives reflected in there. Is that like an experience that you've had with audience members after the performance?
Yeah, you know what? We did a reading actually with Arts in the Armed Forces, and it didn't even dawn on me, silly enough. I was like, oh, I'm the military representative in this play. And like, as we were making these singular entrances, and I was like, oh my God, I really hope that the work that I've done is honest to whoever's experience is in this audience. And after the show, after the reading was done, I had hordes of people coming up and telling me how accurate that representation of that suppression was, and then the final release of being able to express like your innermost thoughts and desires and truth. I mean, that was the conversation that was happening with these military people who were in the military during Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And I had neglected to think about that sector of humanity that would be in the audience, but it's so ripe and it's so real and it's so honest, and it's a lot of people's experience, whether they're in the military or not. In other, occupations, people are having to, keep their sexuality at bay for fear of getting fired or being harmed. And still to this day, like, I get DMs from people almost every night expressing, I am Larry. Like, I'm so grateful for what you were able to do. And it means a lot because, I didn't have that type of queer representation growing up. And I feel like, I feel like my mind was in a totally different place, like in terms of sexuality. I think I was more concerned with like just burning in hell versus, I mean, and this is like that's like a real feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's another facet of Larry that I kind of work with because his mother is so religious. But again, all the language doesn't necessitate some of these things. These are things that I'm like working with inside myself with the character. But yeah, the conversation is happening, especially in my Instagram.
Well, there's a lot of factors, you're even saying beyond the words. There's a lot of factors in there that are trying to repress his true self. And so it does feel, to me, it felt triumphant. I know there were a lot of people, especially because of the outing moment in there around me, who were like, oh God, he like, that's too much for him. That's too much to bear. But to me, it felt triumphant that he was able to push through all of that. What is that, how you see the story for him, as a triumphant one?
Absolutely. I think that is an honoring of the playwright's intention as well, that it is a pushing through, it is triumphant at the end. And it's not because of what Juicy did, right? It's because he chose that this was the time for him to do what he needed to do. There was no other place to go. Juicy did this horrific thing to him publicly. And like I said before, I feel like there was always the intention of doing what happens at the end. But I think he just got a little bit more, honestly, inspiration to do it. There's, like I said before, there's nowhere else for him to go. And it's kind of like the best case scenario at the end. But I hear like different variations of this, to your point, like people think the worst and like this is like heaven, or like this is, but I think that's also a valid look. The way that I see art a lot of times is like the artist gives the piece, and then however it wants to be interpreted is how it's going to be interpreted, and that's, you know, up for grabs. What I do know is that the playwright's intention was for a joyful ending, and I think that the intention is that Larry is coming into his own power, into his true self.
And in a very fabulous outfit, I will say.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, we'll leave it there. We won't spoil people for the true ending, but if you want to see the fabulousness of the ending, check out Fat Ham on Broadway and stay subscribed to Gold Derby throughout the rest of this season. And Calvin, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sam.